So, Maria Magdalena, well, can I? Yes, here we are, ready to present. That's great.
Great. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Okay, great. Let's see. So, the use of narcotics is a charged topic in the country of Sweden. The country's repressive drug policy rests on a foundation of zero tolerance, which means that we should strive for a society completely free of illegal drugs. In addition to this, the societal view of the drug user often reflects the majority party's view, and a drug user is frequently painted as someone who lacks self-control and is seen as someone who needs help through forceful treatment and should be punished through monetary sanctions and incarceration. Monetary sanctions, fines, often lead to indebtedness, as people do not always have the possibility to pay for their fines directly, and problem drug users often end up in such precarious situations as a result of meager financial stability. When it comes to indebtedness, there are several cultural norms in Sweden that surround the issue. For example, people who are heavily indebted are often seen as lacking self-control or morality, and they are deemed to be untrustworthy. And consequences following records of non-payment at the Swedish enforcement agency, that is Kronofogden, may also lead to social exclusion. Combining the issues of problem drug use and indebtedness, this study's aim has been to examine how social interactions have shaped drug users' attitudes about how approachable they deem society to be, and I have also tried to locate these experiences in a societal context. The guiding questions are: what social implications emerge from being an indebted drug user in Sweden? How do the participants manage these social implications? And how do the participants' experiences affect their perceptions of the attainability of Swedish society? So the theoretical perspectives is stigma and agency. So building on Goffman's theory of stigma, Link and Fellon conceptualized the concept further in 2001. They introduced stigmatization as a process that is sanctioned by power structures in society, such as cultural, economic, and political power. And there are 5 components in movement for a stigma process to take place. The first component addresses people's tendency to separate human differences and label them into categories. And the second component is when the label is connected to a set of disagreeable features and it puts a stain on a person's moral status. And this could, for example, be in how people may judge drug users as dangerous or indebted people as untrustworthy. And the third component is when the labeling results in a separation between us, the normals, and them, the deviant. And the label becomes a rationale for treating the different people different. And this leads to the fourth component, which is discrimination and status loss. As a result of the other components, it leads to power loss and an unequal distribution of life chances, such as housing or getting a job. And the fifth component addresses stigma's dependence on power structures, as it takes power to stigmatize. Cultural power, for example, lies in how the label and the discrediting attributes are grounded in social norms. However, theories on stigma may risk painting the stigmatized as a passive recipient, and I didn't want that, so I felt it was important to include how the participants manage the stigmatization. So I chose to include the concept of agency to try to balance the theoretical framework a bit. Departing from Emir Bayer and Nische, I describe action as the individual's ability to exercise habits, imagination, and judgment, and the interplay between these practices. That is to say, we contextualize social experiences and use reflection and interpretation to shape action, which is embedded in social norms and in values. And in this study, agency is outlined through what I call stigma management. Some examples are how, when feelings evaluated, people, or when they are evaluated in social interaction, The stigmatized may exclude themselves from various social contexts, and they may also form their own groups in group identity, or try to correct the stigma to try to become part of society again, which is complicated by their labels. I advertised in 2 Facebook groups which had a main focus on science and drugs, as well as on my own private Facebook wall, and then it got shared through the ether, a very good method, I believe. And I am aware that this method may only gather participants that have their own agendas and motives for joining, but I mean, one could say that people who participate in interview studies always choose to do so because of their own interest in the matter. And the end result was 10 participants, and they were both women and men, ranging from 30 to 60 years of age. All of them except one from Finland were born in Sweden. Their social backgrounds differed, which I believe could provide interesting results should their experiences be similar to each other. Within the time frame given, I believe that the participants' stories were best captured in a context where they had the chance to reflect upon events of their everyday lives and their experiences without firm questions that steered the interview fully. So I chose the semi-structured interview, and I had an interview guide that was built around themes, and I actively used follow-up questions in response to their stories. The interviews were held via phone over between 40 and 70 minutes. With the basis in the research question, the transcribed material was coded by applying several labels constructed out of words or corresponding synonyms found in the participant's narration. And the coding labels were then summarized into 25 basic themes, such as social networks, self-isolation, medical treatment, life chances, and the crime. And after the coding process, I built a theoretical framework out of the chosen concept stigma and agency, and then returned to the material. And then 4 themes emerged, and these themes were explored through investigating the processes in which they were stigmatized, the social implications of these processes, and how they managed the stigmatization. So, the first theme is called The Debt Casts a Shadow. Although the reasons for indebtedness varied, there were several similarities in their experiences. First, there was the issue of records of non-payment, that is betalningsanmärkning, the mark that one gets if one steps and up at the Swedish Enforcement Agency. Several participants felt that this mark disclosed their status as indebted, so one might say that it was a label. It also stamped them with their predicaments, which separated them from others, and this was connected to discrediting attributes in the participants' view, such as lacking morality and self-control. The mark in showing their indebtedness restrained their access to status-affirming institutions, such as housing and work, and the indebtedness thus led to status loss and curbed their chances of gaining back their status. Furthermore, the devaluation that several felt in social interaction led them to avoiding social contexts or trying to avoid to disclose their status as much as possible. They tried to manage their stigma, which was hard because of the records of non-payments. But feelings of shame and social exclusion were not always prevalent in the conversations. When it came to community reintegration, work proved to be a very important factor. And some of them had managed to acquire work. And it was seen as a solution to their stigmatization and as a motivator for continuing to try to become part of society again. The second theme is being a drug abuser in social interplay. When talking about the debt issue, it soon became clear that even though it had important implications, it was not the dominant factor in the participants' lives. Some of them expressed that being seen as a drug abuser was far worse than than revealing their indebtedness. Being labeled a drug abuser permeated several layers of their communication. whether it was with friends or family or government officials, and the drug abuser label carried with it a set of disagreeable features, which in turn the participants connected to unfavorable characteristics. Although the identity of a social being is complex and consists of several layers of expression and roles, the label imposed on the stigmatized becomes a description of their very essence. So consequentially, the labeling process facilitates the act of attributing them with negative stereotypes, and in the case of Sweden, the label may be linked to having a weak personality, again lacking self-control or morality, or being a slave to stimuli. In the country, self-discipline and self-control are values held in high regard. So those who break social norms by using drugs become separated from the rest of conventional society. This separation develops into a rationale for treating them different from the rest, and this became apparent when some of the participants told me about contact with health services. Wait. Sorry, I just dropped my script. Let's see. Okay, sorry.
It's going well.
Services. They felt they were treated differently in health services from the rest because of their drug use. They were also refused jobs because of a former drug use, not a current. And this led to some of them trying to manage their stigma by hiding their status as drug users as much as they could. When talking about social networks such as family and friends or society as a whole, the participants often expressed that they were excluded from gatherings. They also felt the need to isolate themselves from certain social settings because of their drug abuser label. And as a response to the exclusion, several of the participants have separated themselves from normal people or Svenssons. In this type of management, stigma management, they established a form of group identity where they separated themselves from the rest of society, which was deemed unwelcoming. When talking with the participants, this is the third theme, the decriminalization of the individual. So when talking about with the participants about their life circumstances, the question of criminalization frequently appeared. The impression of being labeled a criminal was closely connected to the label of drug abuser, and to be treated as a criminal was in their eyes disgracing and was seen as one of the foundations of their exclusion. The criminal records that they had in showing that they used drugs impacted their life chances. I mean, the mark in one's criminal records can itself be damaging to one's character in social interaction with employers and landlords. However, when it became connected to the drug abuser label, their situation became truly aggravating. So the drug abuser label and the criminal label intersected with each other. They made attempts at correcting their stigma and return to society by looking for work and housing, but the criminal records prevented such strategies by continuing to display the individual not only as a criminal, but as a drug abuser as well. In contextualizing the social experience of being a drug abuser in Sweden, the participants arrived at some conclusions. The absence of help risked locking drug users in criminal circles. The criminal label lessened the chances of getting adequate help. It also devaluates people who are socially vulnerable. Drug users are stated to be the victims, so both labels, drug abuser and criminal, excludes them from society. For them, the key that will open society and make it more acceptable and attainable for them is decriminalization. All participants arrive at this conclusion. So, to conclude, the social implications from being an indebted drug user in Sweden today are many. They are stigmatized on several levels, where the labeling of them becomes a rationale for discrimination. They have attempted to manage their stigma by trying to reintegrate into society, but such processes are often curbed, as they do not have the political, economic, or cultural power to overthrow the stigma processes. Although the indebtedness does not play a major part in their lives, it operates in the background, strengthening the other two stigma processes by, for example, stripping the participants of economic power. and many of them believe that society is close to them. The participant solution of decriminalization is met with resistance, as society and politicians believe their actions should be punished through legal means, and the stigmatization they face is thus culturally accepted, which may very well be partly grounded in the fact that drug use is criminal. And as the debate of criminalization of drug use proceeds over Europe, I believe that there needs to be further research into how various stigma processes are connected to and strengthened by the stigmatization of drug users. And lastly, my research does not intend to provide any solutions for the participants' social exclusion. However, the stigma processes that are at play here show that there exists a socially vulnerable group within our society consisting of people that are excluded from participating on the basis of an ideologically constructed drug policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So interesting. I love the way you have looked at these, in a way, intersectional disadvantages and looked at, how they overlaid and multiple in this particular case. We'll let the word free to anyone who wants to ask. And why do you think? Just say hello to your supervisor, who I also saw here. Very nice, Oscar, to see you. Yes, lots of people who have appeared. So I see friends and family. Welcome to you too, if you've come into the session a little late. Are there any questions to Maria Magdalena on this very interesting presentation? I wanted to ask you, how did you actually do the recruitment? I think to recruit in hidden groups like you've done, I just wanted to know what did you say when you recruited in sort of online?
So I wrote an ad of sorts where I thank you where I wrote what I wanted to do, and that I looked for indebted drug users, and I also said that I know that these are subjects that are can be sensitive to talk about. So already in the ad I said that this would be, it would be anonymous, and that I will, so it was very important for me from the start to underline anonymous and stuff like that. But there were 15 people from the beginning, so many people were interested, but then they declined because some of them had more pressing issues in their lives. And some of them were active drug users, and some were former drug users. So,
yeah, very interesting. I think your study shows that we shouldn't shy away from sort of hidden populations, but there is so much more work to be done in these groups that are not easily accessible. Very, very interesting. Is there anyone else who wants to ask something? Let me have a look on time. So otherwise it's time for another very short break. No, actually, it's a longer break now, because I thought that at this time maybe you needed a little longer break. So next we start with the final session, not last but not least, sections on emotions and various perspectives on emotions, on 22.3, and then we have our final sort of session or concluding session. But if nobody else has any questions to Maria Magdalena, thank you to you and to Robin for a great session on framing and agency and stigma. So I'll clap a little again just to say thank you.